Daniel Sports Central, we go for our 2022 college football predictions for the Texas Longhorns, a team that went 5-7 overall in the 2021 season. Kind of a disappointing season for the Longhorns. This team barely missed out on making it to a bowl game, but in the end, Texas is a team that is widely thought of to be the biggest dark horse in the nation going into the 2022 season. So that said, how will this team be in 2022? Will they end up being a dark horse national contender in the 2022 season? That's what we'll be going over here today. We'll be analyzing this team, predicting their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. Texas 5-7 last season, 4-2 in their first 6 games, so not a bad start to the season for the Longhorns, but they were 1-5 in their last 6 games. That is not a record that you want to have in the second half of the season, and they took a few close losses, a few bad losses as well, and in the end, this team missed out on a bowl game, which is certainly a huge disappointment. For Texas, this is a team that's definitely had some tremendous talent over the years. They've had a couple of good seasons, but in the end, they've disappointed quite a bit over the past couple. But going into 2022, potentially the pieces are there, and this team can make it back to near 6 or even be a dark horse of the college football playoff. We'll see. But they beat Texas Tech last season, 70-35. That was a shootout. Beat TCU on the road, 32-27. But here come the close losses. They lost to Oklahoma, blew a huge lead in that matchup, 48-55. Lost to Baylor on the road, 24-31. Lost to Kansas. That's one that certainly a lot of fans who go against Texas still haven't forgotten about that one. Losing to Kansas there, 56-57 at home, mind you. And they beat Kansas State, though, to finish out the season 22-17. So they did bounce back and got a pretty good win against Kansas State to finish out the season. Turns out K-State, they were a decent team last season, so that was a good win to finish out the 2021 season. But now looking at 2022, the roster people going to next season, there are a few significant changes, but in general, it looks really good going to next year. Casey Thompson is transferred away. He is off to Nebraska, and you got Quinn Ewers coming in, Ohio State quarterback that is widely thought of to be a huge impact player. And there's reason to believe that he could bring Texas to a really good season in 2022. Quinn Ewers, we haven't seen him play a whole lot in college, but he's definitely got the potential to have a huge impact on this team. And Casey Thompson, of course, transferring away last season. His stats weren't terrible: 2,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 picks, and a 63% completion rate. He also rushed for 157 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he wasn't terrible last season. He was a bit inconsistent at times, but I do think Texas gets an upgrade for sure with Quinn Ewers, even though he hasn't even played in college yet. You return your top running back. The backfield looks great. You got Robinson coming back. You got Johnson coming back. That's going to be huge going into next season. Both running backs combined for over 1,700 yards last season of rushing and over 2,100 yards of total offense with 20 touchdowns. So backfield looks excellent going into next season. That's going to be huge. Receiving core looks really good. Xavier Worthy's coming back. Jordan Whittington's also coming back. Last season, Worthy put up nearly 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. And then, of course, Whittington put up nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Marcus Washington is transferring out, but last season he didn't have a terribly big impact on this team, putting up nearly 300 yards. Texas does lose 3 on the offensive line, so that's probably one of the main concerns for this team. There aren't many concerns, though. 1 defensive lineman, 2 linebackers, and then 2 in the secondary. So even defensively, you lose 5 starters, but that's not, most teams lose 4 to 5 starters on the defense, so I'm not too concerned. Brings to the question, is this team a dark horse college football playoff contender in 2022? This is a team that is, I've seen many preseason polls where Texas is in the top 10. I've seen a couple where Texas is in the top 5. And considering this team was 5-7 last season, and it seems like kind of a stretch in the preseason to rank this team in the top 5 for a preseason ranking. But I can see why this team is ranked so highly in some of these preseason polls. And once again, that highly is on Quinn Ewers, and also the return production is in general really good for this team going into next season. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season. You got Texas. Casey Thompson, of course, he's off to Nebraska once again. Quinn Ewers coming in from Ohio State. Receiver Hall is coming in from Alabama, so he adds to the depth in the receiving core. Tyler Johnson, offensive lineman, is off to Houston. You bring in Jaleel Billingsley, tight end from Alabama. So you got, the transfer portal has been great for this team. You got multiple key players coming in. Nair, receivers coming in from Wyoming, but you do lose Woodard and Joshua Moore, two receivers, off to different places. You also get, or you do lose a few players here. You lose Warren, defensive lineman at Texas State. Jordan Thomas is in the transfer portal. Dixon, receivers, off to SMU. Abiara, defensive end, is off to SMU as well. Harrison, receivers, in the transfer portal. Marcus Washington went off to Nebraska. You do bring in Diamante Tucker, linebacker from James Madison, but you do lose Wiley, tight end, who really didn't even have that big of an impact on this team, but he's off to TCU. Recruiting-wise, looks fantastic once again going to next season. 5th in the nation, 1st in the Big 12. You got 2 5-stars and 24 stars coming in for next season. So the recruiting is excellent for this team. I mean, transfer portal has been great. Recruiting's been great. I mean, there is no reason why this team shouldn't be a national contender next season. But once again, it's just, I mean, this team has disappointed a bit in the past, and so that's why there's a bit of hesitancy with saying this team is going to be in the college football playoff next season. But looking at your schedule now going into next season, looking at who you're playing next season, and it is a tough schedule. You got Alabama as one of your non-conference games. I mean, this is probably, I mean, if Texas played a slightly easier non-conference game against other than Alabama, I feel like that would actually benefit this team huge. I mean, you start off the season with 3, 4, 5 wins pretty easily. I mean, that sets you up really well going into a more tough second half of the season. But instead, you do have to play the Crimson Tide in week 2, which, I mean, if you beat Alabama in week 2, I mean, that would be absolutely incredible for the Longhorns. That'd be massive. And that would break the college football world if you were to beat Alabama, Nick Saban at home on September 10th. That'll be a huge matchup there. But looking at September here, Louisiana Monroe, easy win. Crimson Tide, I am going to predict the Crimson Tide to win that matchup. I just feel like Alabama next season, they are my favorite to win the national title. I mean, it's nothing new, but I mean, they're looking great going to next season once again. So I'm going to favor the Crimson Tide there. Then you got UTSA coming to town. I'm going to say that's an easy win. Not really expecting too much out of them. Then Texas Tech on the road. I'm going to put that game in yellow, but I definitely want to favor the Longhorns in that matchup. So I've got you 3-1. Once again, that Alabama game is, I mean, that would be a massive win if you can beat Alabama there, and you'd probably be ranked. I mean, if you beat up Louisiana Monroe and then you beat Alabama at home in week 2, there's a good chance this team, I mean, jumps into the top 5. I mean, already after week 2. So that'd be insane. But then so you're 3-1 heading into October. I'm pretty confident this team goes 3-1, and you're in good shape if you are 3-1 and you put up a fight against Alabama. But October, West Virginia, I do think West Virginia is going to be a decent team next season, but I think Texas takes care of them. Oklahoma, you're going to beat the Sooners next season. I do think that you take out Oklahoma in what is going to be a close one. Once again, a really great matchup. Iowa State, not expecting too much out of them, but I'm going to put that game in yellow, but still favor the Longhorns by a decent amount there. So you're heading into the Oklahoma State matchup on the road. The Cowboys are probably my favorite to win the Big 12. I mean, you got OU, you got Oklahoma State, and Texas. Those are your big 3 of the Big 12 going into next season. Oklahoma State, that's going to be a huge matchup. I mean, it's a tough place to play. I feel like that's going to be a close one, potentially a really good matchup as well, but I'm going to take the Cowboys in a close one there. So you lose that one, but I mean, if you can beat them and you're still undefeated in conference play going into November, you're in really good shape. But you're 6-2 in this scenario going into November. Kansas State on the road. Now, this one, some of you guys may not understand, but Kansas State next season, I do think K-State is a 7-9 win team next season. I'd probably lean more 8-9 wins next season. I do think K-State's going to be kind of that dark horse in the Big 12. They're not going to win it, but they're going to be in the top 5, top 4 in the conference. So K-State, I do think that one kind of sneaks up, and they do end up beating Texas in a close matchup. So, I mean, and either way, that game's pretty much a toss-up. You beat Kansas State, I mean, which is very much possible, even though it's a road matchup. I mean, that puts you in a really good place with only one conference loss going into the rest of your November, which is fairly easy. You got TCU at home, which I'll put that game in yellow, but I'll still favor Texas there. Kansas on the road is an easy win. And then you got Baylor, and Baylor's a team that that's kind of the one team that some are expecting to be, once again, a top 25 team. I don't think Baylor's going to be that good next season. They've lost a lot of their talent. They've lost a few key players to the transfer portal over the past couple of months. And Baylor, I just feel like is going to disappoint next season. I think the Bears are a 6-8 win team. I'm predicting 6 or 7 wins for them, but I do think you take care of Baylor and you take care of Kansas on the road this season, and you beat TCU as well. So I got you at 9-3 next season. 9-3 to 10-2, I think, is incredibly reasonable. I do feel like, I mean, if you're a one loss in conference going in, I mean, you should be in the Big 12 title game, and that puts you in a good position to win a Big 12 title and potentially get to the college football playoff. I mean, a one-loss Texas, I mean, if you go undefeated in conference play and you're a one-loss team, I mean, your one loss is to Alabama, you put up a fight against the Crimson Tide, and you win the Big 12 title as a 12-1 team, that should get you into the college football playoff, I'd assume. I definitely would think so. So it's a very interesting team, and Texas is very unpredictable always. I mean, this is a team that, I mean, they've got tremendous talent. There's no reason why this team shouldn't be a Big 12 contender next season, but they've disappointed, I mean, a decent amount over the past few years, so you never know. But 9-3 to 10-2, I'd say, is a safe projection for this team, and that's what I'm going with, is 9-3 for the Longhorns. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Texas, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.